Greetings YouTube and welcome to the Dragon Network. Today's video is going to be a deck profile, but it's one I know some of you are not going to be happy to see because it's Dragon Rulers, and Dragon Rulers are the most hated deck in the game despite the fact that they are the best deck in the game. Yes, I am doing a profile on Dragon Rulers. I thought I'd show you guys just how I would run it, as I had the chance to muck around with it. I had to borrow cards for the extra deck, but otherwise this is how I would run the deck, and I just figured I'd just show you guys why I would do certain things. It's perfectly honest, despite the fact that this deck is called degenerate and skillless, etc, etc, I have to admit it does take some degree of ability to get the most out of this. Like, random scrub can pick this up and they'll completely crush some other person playing a bad deck. Like, what's a good example? Like, if they try and play gladiator beasts the way they used to be, or they try and play crystal beasts or aliens, of course you're going to annihilate them because this deck is just that good. But if you go up against someone who's playing something on this deck's power level, i.e. Prophecy or the Mirror Match, then you kind of have to actually know what you're doing, think about what you're doing, and take in consideration what your opponent may have, because if they're better than you with their deck, you're going to die. It's that simple. And this is a deck that's easy to pick up, but it is difficult to master. And yeah, I'm sure we'll see like some random bad people do really well with this at Nats, but I'm pretty certain that the majority of Dragon Ruler decks that are going to top are going to be piloted by good people. That being said, let's just get into the deck profile itself. It is kind of similar to Dragon Ruler builds. I mean, let's be honest, it does have the required 20 dragons, and then there's the 6 hand traps. But then after that, you kind of have room for how you want to like tech this out, and that's something I really do like about Dragon Rulers, is there's a lot of room for teching and innovation, and it's just something you don't really get to see out of the top decks. Like, remember how last year there was really only so much you could do with Dino Rabbit, Chaos Dragon, Windups, and Inzectors, whereas Dragon Ruler builds, they're never 100% the same. That being said, you got your big dragons and you got your mini dragons. I'm running Corsica. I thought about Flamval Guard as well, but I just like this guy, and the reason why I am running this guy over Guard is that there are those times you're going to need to make your synchro play and have a blaster effect, either to summon him or to blow up something so that you can make your synchro play. And that's why I do prefer this guy, and the 800 attack can sometimes get in there and do decent stuff. Plus, you can always banish this. You can search this off of Tempest, and then on the next turn you can pitch it forward with Tempest to do something, and it's a win. So yeah. Then you got 6 hand traps and your 3 Veilers. Not much else to say on those. One thing I do want to take a quick moment to talk about is, just to be perfectly honest, let me get them out here, I really do like the Dragon Rulers as a concept, and hear me out on this. What I mean by it is, the Dragon Rulers themselves, like, granted, there are flaws in how they've gone about things, but I really do like how the Dragon Rulers have their playstyle. Yeah, I mean, did you ever think that we would ever have a Dragon deck that operates in the manner this does, where you're banishing stuff from your graveyard constantly? Like, yeah, there was Chaos Dragons, but Chaos Dragons are nothing compared to this. I'm going to say that right now. I mean, I took 2012 Chaos Dragons with Future Fusion, 2 red mids, the whole 9 yards, still could barely even touch this deck, aside from like the one time where I sack OTK'd, but otherwise this deck is like better. But yeah, who would have thought we'd ever have a Dragon deck that functioned just like this? And to be perfectly honest, I find the whole concept of them being able to utilize the hand and the graveyard for all the resources to be just a really neat mechanic. It's a pity that it turned out like this, but I think maybe if Konami had done a couple things different, we could have had something that was just really neat. Like, conceptually, I like Dragon Rulers. It's just a really, really interesting concept, or I mean, really interesting take on the classic Dragon deck, because up until this point, again, banishing was always the one thing you never liked to see in a Dragon deck, and now it's become one of its greatest strengths. It's kind of freaky, huh? But that is just how dragons keep evolving. That's the one thing about dragons I've always liked, is they always keep changing and changing. Like, a couple years ago, what was it? Hopeless Dragon was the way to go. Then we had Disaster, and then we had Dragoonity, Chaos Dragon, Hiatus, now this. Like, look at all the styles of dragon there are out there. And even before Hopeless, what do we have? 5th Dragon. Just, wow. Dragons. Why are you so good? I'm not even mad about that too. I'm sure some people are like, why are you so good? I freaking hate dragons. Yeah, like, remember all the warrior shit we had? Okay, I'm gonna stop being hipster right now. Okay, onto the spells. 3 copies of Forbidden Chalice. I'm liking this over Breakthrough Skill at this time. Granted, Breakthrough Skill is Breakthrough Skill. It gives you 6 negates for 1 card. I mean, for 3 cards alongside your Veiler, so you have 9 negates. But on the other hand, I like how Forbidden Chalice is playable immediately on my turn. The attack boost is sometimes helpful. And of course, there's the whole Colossal Fighter while you're under max COTK, which can actually happen more times than you think. It's super situational, but there are people out there who still don't know about that situation, and you can take advantage of it and kill and deck them out as long as they have a monster with 2500 attack or more, and you're able to make a Colossal Fighter. Remaining spells, triple Gold Sark definitely should go to at least 2 in the ban list. It's kind of good. And then there's, of course, your Broken Wing card that up until this point was never really seen play. It was a meh card, but then comes along one deck and absolutely busts the hell out of it to the point where if your opponent resolves multiples of these, what is the point of playing on? Man, I hope they hit this on the ban list. Does it sound familiar? Yes, I'm making a jab at Drag Down into the Grave, because Super Rejuvenation is a lot like that card, where they're only busted in 1 deck, but that 1 deck is fucking infuriating to go against. Super Rejuvenation is in this deck, and Dragon Exodia. Drag Down is in Dark World. It's, yeah, it's kind of crazy how similar the 2 cards are. But anyway, yeah, Super Rejuvenation, if you get off multiples of these, you're probably going to be either winning or at the point where your opponent just cannot do anything as you'll have drawn so much. I honestly don't get these as much as everyone else does. It's kind of my luck. On the other hand, I'm also running a 42 card deck, but the 42 cards, I haven't really noticed a difference from a 40 card deck given how much deck thinning you do with this deck, and the 2 cards I'm running are kind of helpful. But yeah, Super Rejuvenation definitely should go to 1 on the ban list. It's just way too good at 3. 2 copies of 7 Sword. Some people may hate having multiples, but I'm honestly liking the 2 of them, and a lot of people have said this point once, and I'll say it again. Having more 7 Swords allows you to dig into your deck for your power cards, and more importantly, your sided cards game 2 and 3. Sacred Sword is a far better card than Gold Sarcophagus is post-siding, as it allows you to get to your stuff 3 cards faster. And unlike Gold Sarcophagus, if they change Imperial Iron Wall to this, you still at least get to do some stuff because you're banishing for cost, whereas Gold Sarcophagus would resolve without effect. That's actually why I want to put 3 of these in here, but I cannot find a 3rd one, and to be perfectly honest, I'm not going to be playing this deck again anytime soon, so yeah, Disaster only needs the 2 of these, so that's why I've just gotten the 2. Then for the one-ofs, Book and Storm. No Dark Hole, but that one's obvious, and I cut out Monster Reborn because it's kind of not needed in this deck. It's kind of crazy, and I know some people are going to like get super pissed off at me for saying this, but yeah, Monster Reborn sometimes is a little unnecessary, as all you're going to be doing is reviving a big dragon. Granted, it allows you to summon a big dragon without using a big dragon's effect, but the card that you could be running in Monster Reborn's place could be actually useful, and the cards I'm running over Monster Reborn and Card Destruction, which I was playing before, but I ended up cutting, are 2 copies of Raigeki Break. And Raigeki Break is just flat out spot removal. There are those times where your opponent will have like that one card, like that main decked Imperial Iron Wall, which is a good idea, or that main decked Vanity's Emptiness. You can pitch a dragon from your hand and blow up that card, while also getting yourself ready to plus off a Super Rejuvenation or just summon a big dragon. So that's why I'm starting to run this in here. I admit I got this idea from Rodrigo Torres. It's not Torres, but it's something close to that. I'm sorry for getting the name wrong, but it's the one that, like, yeah, I believe it won the Spanish Nats. He was running 2 of these, and I really like the idea behind it, so I figured I'd just follow suit. It was either running 2 copies of Raigeki Break or just keeping Monster Reborn or Card Destruction in, and to be perfectly honest, I'm liking Break over those 2. Now, let's get to the reason why this deck doesn't really see much play, at least on the local level, and that would be the extra deck, because, you know, expensive. I'll lay out the synchros first. Okay, so Get your army arm for those times where you are able to set army arm onto your opponent's monster, summon a couple of your big dragons and just suicide into their monster and game them with the burn damage. Then you got Black Rose Dragon and Ancient Sacred Wyvern, the 2 cards you make while you have Phantom Beastcraft tokens on the field and an effect Veiler. Veiler is needed to make this. Then you can swing with Draco Sack and then swing with this for some large damage. It's not an OTK, but it puts your opponent within game shot of, say, a Thunder Charger. And the Black Rose Dragon you just use to clear things like Obelisk the Tormentor, which is kind of a problem for this deck, as I mentioned in my Frog Monarch video. Then for the level 8s, you've got Colossal Fighter for the deck out play while under Max C, and you can use this to ram into an opposing Crimson Blader, and then steal the Crimson Blader and beat over their monster and lock them down for the turn. This Thought Ruler Archfiend, I cut Stardust Dragon for this, which is something I never thought I would have done, but I'm actually finding Stardust Dragon to be underwhelming at this current time. Flashing Carrot Stardust, I would probably consider running in here, but right now, I'm kind of liking Thought Ruler for his ability to get around back row, because the cards that I would summon Thought Ruler in are the things that Stardust Dragon hates, i.e. Evac Device, Lance, Stress, Chalice, etc., etc. Thought Ruler Archfiend gets around those things, and he's an Eradicator target, which is kind of nice. You got your Scrap Dragon plus Draco Sack is actually kind of really nice. Just keep trying to pop the Draco Sack, pop the monsters, free pluses, awesome. And he's an Earth, so you can like banish it for Redox for some reason, or just revive it back, whatever. And lastly, 2 copies of Crimson Blader, because this is the best synchro in the format by far. Like, this is the equivalent to Royal Oppression during the Teledat format. Yeah, I got this analogy from DubKDad. So sue me. I'm subscribed to him, and chances are you are too. And what he said is, yeah, it's right bang on. Like, this thing is oppression on legs, and it is what wins you the mirror match. And trying to bait your opponent into setting up a board where you can Blader lock them is one of the more important things. And that's why when you're playing Dragon Rulers and you think your opponent has a Blader, the mini Dragon plays you want to go for are ideally either Blast, Burner, or Reactant, so that you can open with a Redox or a Blaster on your board, and thus they can't Blader over them. Because if you open with a Tempest or a Tidal on the board, then they'll just go into Blader, beat it over, and proceed to lock you down, and that's not particularly fun. Granted, you can Blaster off the Blader, but again, builds are starting to run 2 Bladers in case that first one gets Veilered, and then they lose it, and then they can just make another one or what have you. And then we'll just get into where most of my proxies are, the Xyz. So first up, this is supposed to be an Mermail Abyss Gaios. You make this with 2 titles. It doesn't come up that often, but it does help you against certain matchups, and the blanket effectification is just always nice. I made this in the mirror actually, and it was rather helpful for setting my opponent up into a situation where he made a bit of a misplay. He wasn't, his mind was elsewhere, and I kind of capitalized on that. That's kind of how the mirror match really goes. First off, it is intense as hell. And secondly, he who misplays first will ultimately lose, and it's kind of what happens is you're trying to force your opponent into making a suboptimal play that you can capitalize on, and then proceed to either game them. The big eye on big eye on big eye crap is not actually that good. Like, making a big eye, if you do not have a Veiler or a Chalice or a Breakthrough skill to protect it, you're an idiot, because then they're just going to take their big eye and you'll proceed to start getting your ass whooped. You really only bring out the big eye when you feel you've got the protection for it. And to be perfectly honest, I found myself trying to use this card sparingly. Like, you don't just throw a big eye out there much. Like, hell, I don't even feel comfortable throwing Draco Sack out in front of like 4 bajillion back row. I kind of want to get around it first, but back to big eye. You don't just throw this thing down. You try and summon this when it's really, really, really to your benefit. Like, if your opponent has a really good monster to take with it. Otherwise, I just kind of hold on to the big eye until it's absolutely needed. And then you've got Mecha Phantom Beast, Draco Sack, aka the game plane. It is what it is. It's the best rank 7 in the game. It should probably be hit. I know it would be unfair to Mecha Phantom Beast players, but look at the Ice Barrier monsters and the archetype as a whole. They suck, and 2 of their boss monsters are banned. And Phantom Beasts are somewhat decent, but their boss monster is too broken. Like, yeah, this thing's kind of imbalanced, and it needs to be hit. Same for this. This needs to go to 1. This needs to go to 1 or 2. That would be my way of at least handling the main deck. And as far as, the extra deck, and for the main deck, I would semi-limit these things, and that would be it. Limiting these things would be stupid, and especially with those tints coming up. But 2, I think, would be fine. If Dragon Rulers went down to 2 big dragons, 1 and 1 of these, 1 Super Rejuvenation and 2 Gold Sarks, it would slow down the deck immensely, but it wouldn't kill it, and it would be more fair to play. That's just what I feel can be done with this deck. But, yeah, that's pretty much all I can say on Mech and Phantom Beast, and I'm actually surprised I'm going to 15 minutes with a deck that's so straightforward. Or is it straightforward? But, yeah, I just figured I'd do some little, side ranting. One last thing before I go to my side deck. These are what I use to keep track of my mini dragons. Well, actually, just my big dragons. It may, first off, no, you will not get DQ'd or anything for that, because these are things you they're mandatory effects that you need to keep track of, and you're allowed to make notes on mandatory things that need to be kept track of, i.e. gold sarcophagus. That's why you use your die. I just figured this would be a fun way to use my big dragon effect. So if I use a redox, I'll do this. If I use a reactant, I'll turn it to the side. I need to get some magic lands, actually. I just don't know what magic lands would work for for the mini dragons. Anyway, quick side deck. This side is just more or less tailored to my locals, where I know the mirror is, and where some decks that get their shit pushed in by eradicators. But these 2 cards, I just kind of threw them because I was looking for a second side blocker, and I could not find it, so I threw in a Wiseman's Chalice. This I just added in because it's honestly better. The idea I had behind these cards is you use them for the mirror to take their dragons from the graveyard. And Wiseman's Chalice, if you're not familiar, is a card from Duelist Revolution. You can only play it if you have no monsters and you select 1 monster from your opponent's graveyard and you summon it. You cannot tribute it, you cannot synchro with it, and it goes back to your opponent during the end turn. Well, that's terrible, right? Yes, but you can exceed with it. And in this case, I summoned a title from my opponent's graveyard, then summoned my own title and went to Abyss Gaios. On the other hand, though, the much better card, which I only have 1 of, is Autonomous Action Unit, and this is actually a viable card again for the mirror. You pay 1,500 for life, take your opponent's monster from their graveyard, equip it to this card, or equip this to it, and then you can just exceed into it, or even synchro with it. You can also use this for different other matches, like if you're playing against a deck that also has level 7, so you can just take the level 7 and do whatever you want with it. So that's why I feel Autonomous Action Unit is actually not that bad a card for the side, and wow, this video is going pretty long. Let's try and wrap this up. Okay, so the remainder of the side deck is pretty simple stuff. You got the 3 Typhoons, the 3 Eradicators. I'm running 2 Fusilier Dragons. I thought about 3. I was actually running 3, but I didn't really need it. If I really need to get the 3rd Virus off, I can just sack a Big Eye or a Red Dragon Archfiend or a Thought Ruler, but this is level 7. You can sack off for Eradicator, and you can use it for Exceeds material. Then you've got Electric Virus, which is actually kind of really good for the Mirror, for Evil Swarm, and other matchups like that. 2 Swift Scarecrow, and 1 Psy Blocker. Scarecrow's for the Mirror, Psy Blocker is for matchups where your opponent has like that one thing that can shut you down, i.e. Evil Swarm. You call Ophion. If the Ophion's already on the field, it's turned off. You can do your stuff. You can call Jowgen with this. You can call Kaiku with this. You can call... That's a good one. Imperial Iron Wall. Like, if there's that one card that's bothering you, Psy Blocker gets around it. And, well, that's pretty much it for this deck itself. I know some people are not going to be happy with this. I'm sure I'll get, like, the automatic 5 dislikes for profiling this deck, but I don't particularly care. I wanted to show you guys how I would run Dragon Drillers, and I hope the guys out there that are playing this deck and playing it well, not like the derps that do shit like summon big dragons without thinking. I hope that they'll appreciate like my input on this, and I hope you guys at least appreciated my speculation on what they could do for the ban list, because this deck is going to die. There's just no way about it. This deck is like Inzectors from last format, in that they were like the best deck, or one of the best decks. Like, it wasn't, Inzectors weren't as good here, but they were tearing up Japan, and that's what this deck is doing. It's like Inzectors in last year's OCG format. And you know what happened to Inzectors? They got killed, and that's going to happen to these guys. Until next time, people, this is Obelisk TGS, jacking out.